Have you ever seen a mafia boss so powerful that all of Chicago bowed before him? Yet he could no longer feel heat or cold with his own hands for 10 long years after the death of his daughter. And the thing that the greatest nerve specialists in America could never cure began to change because of one small girl, the poor daughter of a housemaid, when she placed her tiny hand into his, and the mafia boss's fingers trembled softly for the first time in a decade. In the dark heart of Chicago, Vincent Callahan, the most feared mafia boss around Lake Shore, lived like a walking corpse inside a towering glass penthouse, overlooking the freezing waters of Lake Michigan. Money, power, blood, and fear. He had everything, except feeling in his own hands. 10 years earlier, a brutal massacre had stolen the woman he loved most, and on that same night, he was told his little daughter had died too. From that moment on, Vincent could no longer feel anything. Boiling water was not hot. Ice was not cold. The touch of another human being had completely disappeared. Doctors called it extreme psychological trauma, but Vincent knew the truth. It was punishment for failing to protect his family. For 10 long years, the hands that once pulled triggers, signed billion-dollar contracts, and made the entire mafia world tremble, had become nothing more than lifeless flesh. Every night he stood alone before the penthouse windows, pressing his palms against the freezing glass without feeling anything except emptiness. He believed his heart had truly died, until the day Emma Thompson, a poor cleaning woman newly hired by the mansion, arrived with her little daughter Lily, an 8-year-old girl with messy blonde hair, a faded pink dress, shoes worn thin from running through the alleys of the South Side. But her eyes were strangely warm. Lily was not afraid of Vincent like everyone else. She looked at him as if behind the cold face was still a man suffering in silence. One rainy afternoon, Vincent returned to the mansion after a violent confrontation with the Ricci gang near the harbor. Blood still stained the collar of his black shirt. The entire mansion was silent enough to suffocate. The bodyguards lowered their heads, avoiding his eyes, because everyone knew when Vincent became angry, the whole city trembled. He sat heavily in the giant leather chair inside the living room. His numb hand tightened around a glass of whiskey, but he could not feel the burning taste. He could not even feel alive anymore. And then small footsteps echoed behind him. Lily, the little girl, stood there holding an old teddy bear. Emma rushed forward in panic. "Lily, don't bother the boss." But the little girl did not step back. Slowly, Lily walked toward Vincent. Her shining eyes stared at the scarred hand of the powerful man. Then gently she placed her tiny hand into his. The entire room froze. The bodyguard stopped breathing. Emma turned pale with fear, because nobody had ever dared touch Vincent Callahan like that. In a soft, innocent voice, Lily whispered, "Are your hands very cold?" Vincent tried to pull away, but in that exact moment, a tiny sensation suddenly moved through the tips of his fingers. Very faint, very weak, but real. Vincent's fingers trembled slightly. The whiskey glass nearly slipped from his hand. His breathing stopped. The cold gray eyes of the mafia boss shook violently. 10 years. After 10 years of living in hell, it was the first thing he had truly felt. Emma covered her mouth and burst into tears. The bodyguards stared at one another in complete shock. Nobody could believe what was happening. Lily continued holding his hand tightly, without fear, without hesitation, only smiling softly. "Can you feel warmth now?" And in that exact moment, something Vincent Callahan thought had died forever began to live again. Not power, not violence, but the heart of a father. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to reflect on the quiet power of kindness, especially when no one else chooses to show it. Share your thoughts in the comments and tell us where you're watching from, which city and country are you in, and what time is it there right now. It's always amazing to see how stories like this connect people from all over the world. Is it United States, London, maybe Canada, Jamaica, South Africa, or anywhere we want to know? And tell us what you learned at the end of this video. If moments like this remind you of the beauty of humanity, please like the video and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss more powerful stories that celebrate compassion, courage, and the simple acts of kindness that can change a life. In the shadowed heart of Chicago, where the glittering skyline met the restless waters of Lake Michigan, Vincent Callahan ruled an empire built on silence and steel. At 42, the fair-skinned Irish-American Don moved through his penthouse like a ghost in a tailored black suit, his broad shoulders carrying the weight of a city he had bent to his will. From the 40th floor of his fortified lakeshore tower, the lights of the South Side flickered far below. a distant reminder of the streets that had forged him. Yet inside the marble and glass fortress, wealth offered no comfort. Everything Vin touched turned to power, except the one thing that mattered most. 10 years earlier, his world had shattered. His wife had been murdered in a rival hit, and with her, their infant daughter had vanished into the chaos of that bloody night. The official word delivered by a trembling lieutenant was that the baby had not survived. Vin had believed it. He had to. The alternative that his own enemies had taken her was a darkness too vast to face. From that day forward, sensation had fled his hands. Doctors called it psychosomatic trauma. He called it justice. Hot coffee, ice water, the touch of another human being, nothing registered. His fingers could crush a throat or sign a contract, but they felt nothing. The numbness had spread inward, freezing his heart until laughter became a foreign sound and kindness a weakness he could not afford. Later that night, Vin stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, staring at the reflection of a man who commanded millions, yet could not feel the glass beneath his palms. Guilt gnawed at him like rust on iron. "I should have protected them," the voice whispered. "I built this empire to keep my family safe, and it destroyed them instead." Remorse coiled tighter with every breath. He had become the monster the streets feared, not because he enjoyed it, but because feeling nothing was easier than feeling everything. Violent emotional conflict raged behind his calm gray eyes. Rage at the rivals who had taken his light fury at himself for letting it happen, and a bone-deep exhaustion that no amount of money or blood could cure. The next morning, the penthouse hummed with the quiet efficiency of fear. Bodyguards moved like shadows, speaking only when spoken to. Vin sat at the head of a long oak table reviewing ledgers, his numb fingers flipping pages he could not truly touch. A rival faction had been encroaching again. Don Ricci's crew pushing into territories Vin had held for 15 years. Another street confrontation loomed tense and inevitable. Vin's jaw tightened as he listened to his captain's report. "They hit one of our warehouses last night, boss. Took a shipment. Left a message. The old lion is losing his teeth." Vin's inner storm surged. He rose slowly, the expensive leather chair sliding back without a sound. "Arrange a meeting on neutral ground. No guns visible. But make sure they understand this ends with them bleeding respect, not me bleeding territory." His voice remained low-controlled, yet inside the conflict tore at him. Every order reminded him of the man he had become, powerful, wealthy, beyond measure, and utterly alone. The empire that protected him had also isolated him. What good was ruling Chicago if the only family he had left was a ghost? Weeks later, the tension on the streets thickened like the humid summer air rolling off the lake. Vin insisted on overseeing a discreet handoff in a quiet industrial stretch near the river. The rival crew arrived under the pretense of negotiation. Words were exchanged, sharp measured. Then, without warning, one of Ricci's men lunged forward in an absurdly unfair provocation, swinging a hidden blade toward Vin's side. The confrontation exploded into chaos, but not the kind that painted the pavement red. Vin's men moved with precision, disarming the attacker in seconds. Vin himself stepped forward, grabbing the man's wrist with those numb hands that still possessed crushing strength. "You tell Ricci," Vin said, voice ice-cold yet laced with the fire of old grief, "that some things are not for sale. Not territory, not respect, and certainly not the memory of my family." The rival was released with a broken wrist and a warning. As Vin walked back to his armored SUV, the inner turmoil roared louder. How many more pointless fights, how many more nights of nothing? Guilt clawed deeper. He had survived, yes, but at what cost? His hands remained dead to the world, just like the daughter he had failed to save. Meanwhile, in a forgotten corner of the South Side, miles from the gleaming tower, a different kind of empire of suffering unfolded. Emma Thompson, a resilient yet destitute young mother, clutched her thin jacket against the biting wind that whipped through the alley behind an abandoned warehouse. At 28, she looked far older, cheeks hollow from months of barely eating, eyes shadowed by sleepless nights spent guarding her children from dangers no mother should face. Her clothes hung loose on her malnourished frame. The soles of her worn sneakers had long ago given out, letting in rainwater and filth. She had not eaten a full meal in 3 days. Her 4 children, 8-year-old Lily, 9-year-old Noah, and the 7-year-old twins, Mia and Max, huddled together under a threadbare blanket in the makeshift shelter of cardboard and plastic sheeting. The unfairness of their existence was crushing. That afternoon, the landlord had evicted them without mercy, citing unpaid rent. Emma could never scrape together from her waitress job at a failing diner. Possessions, few as they were, had been tossed onto the curb. Now, as night fell, Emma fought back tears while singing a soft, trembling lullaby to keep the children calm. Lily, the eldest, watched her mother with eyes too wise for her age. The girl's bare feet were dirty and bruised. Yet she still found ways to move to dance silly little steps in the alley to make the twins smile. Noah stood guard his small frame tense, with the burden of protecting his best friend and her family. Emma's voice was soft timid when she spoke to the children. "We'll find somewhere warmer soon, babies. Mama promises." Inside, however, horror and anxiety tore at her. How much longer can I keep them safe? What kind of mother am I if I can't even feed them? Deep disorientation washed over her as dizziness struck again. She steadied herself against the cold brick wall pane shooting through her exhausted body. The humiliation was absolute, sleeping in alleys, begging silently with her eyes at soup kitchens, watching her children shiver while the city's wealthy drove past in warm cars. Unjust, absurd suffering followed her everywhere. A job lost because she had to stay home with a sick child, food stamps delayed by bureaucratic cruelty, strangers looking away when she asked for help. That same evening, fate pulled two worlds closer than either could imagine. After the tense street confrontation, Vin had his driver take a longer route through the south side, needing the silence of the city's underbelly to quiet his raging mind. Through the tinted window, something caught his eye, a small figure dancing under the dim glow of a flickering street lamp. A barefoot girl, ragged but full of defiant joy, spinning and pretending to slide into home plate like a Cubs player. Her laughter, pure and unrestrained, cut through the armored SUV's silence like a blade of light. Vin's breath caught. For the first time in years, something stirred in his chest. An overwhelming surge of fierce protective love that hit him like a physical blow. Not romantic, not possessive. This was deeper, the raw paternal instinct of a father who had lost everything and suddenly glimpsed a fragment of what he had mourned. His numb hands clenched into fists on his thighs. Who is she? Why does her laugh sound like the one I lost? Guilt and remorse crashed over him in violent waves. He ordered the driver to slow down, watching as the girl Lily continued her silly routine, trying desperately to bring light to her frightened family huddled nearby. The contrast was devastating. Here was the empire of his wealth, marble money, power against the absolute extreme of human misery. A desperate, powerless mother and her starving children, enduring cold, wind-filled nights no one should survive. Vin's inner conflict reached a fever pitch. Part of him wanted to look away to preserve the numbness that kept him functional. Another part, long buried, roared to life with consuming responsibility. No child should dance for survival. No mother should break alone. He did not approach that night. Not yet. But as the SUV pulled away, Vin Callahan, the untouchable Don, felt the first crack in the ice around his heart. The numbness in his hands remained, but something warmer, something dangerous and healing had begun to awaken. Guilt, love, and the fierce need to protect collided inside him with such force that for the first time in a decade he did not sleep when he returned to the silent penthouse. The Empire was still numb. But somewhere in the shadows of Chicago, a small dancing girl had unknowingly lit the first spark that would change everything. Later that night, the armored SUV glided through the dimly lit streets of Chicago's south side like a shark cutting through murky water. Vincent Callahan sat in the back, the city lights reflecting off the tinted windows but never reaching the cold void inside him. The earlier street confrontation with Ricci's men still lingered in his muscles, yet it was not the near miss with the blade that haunted him now. It was the echo of that small, barefooted dancer whose laughter had sliced through the armored silence. Vin's numb hands rested on his thighs, useless as always, but his chest felt strangely tight, as if something long frozen was beginning to crack under impossible pressure. His driver slowed without being asked. There, beneath a flickering street lamp in a narrow alley beside an abandoned warehouse, the girl danced again. Lily moved with raw, unpracticed grace, spinning like a tiny Cubs outfielder chasing a fly ball, then dropping into an exaggerated slide across cracked pavement, her ragged shorts scraping the ground. Her laughter rang out clear and defiant, a sound so alive it seemed to challenge the darkness itself. Nearby, huddled against a graffiti-covered wall, her family watched. The mother, Emma Thompson, clutched two smaller children close. A boy older than Lily stood slightly apart, arms crossed, eyes scanning the shadows with the wariness of someone who had learned too young that safety was an illusion. Vin ordered the vehicle to stop at a distance. He stepped out alone, the expensive Italian leather shoes silent on the damp asphalt. The disparity hit him like a physical force. His tailored coat cost more than this family likely saw in a year. Behind him, the SUV gleamed under the sparse light, a symbol of the empire that shielded him from the very world these souls endured every hour. Inside Vin, a new torment ignited, sharper than guilt, more consuming than remorse. It was a fierce, protective fire he had not felt since holding his infant daughter 10 years ago. She moves like hope itself, he thought, the violent conflict tearing through him. I failed my own child. How can I walk away from this one? Emma noticed the tall stranger first. Her thin frame tensed malnourished shoulders, drawing inward as she pulled the twins tighter. Sleep deprivation had carved deep hollows under her eyes. Her lips were cracked from days without proper water. The eviction earlier that day had been brutally unfair. The landlord had changed the locks while she was at the diner, begging for extra shifts, tossing their few belongings into the alley like trash. Now, with the wind cutting through her threadbare jacket, Emma felt the familiar wave of deep disorientation. Her vision blurred at the edges. She steadied herself against the brick wall pane, lancing through her starved muscles, yet her voice remained soft and timid when she finally spoke toward the approaching figure. "Sir, we're not causing trouble. Please. The children are just trying to stay warm." Her words carried the polite caution of someone who had been powerless too many times, fearing that any strong man might mean new cruelty. Lily, however, did not shrink. She paused mid-spin, her bare feet dirty and bruised, and looked straight at Vin with wide, curious eyes. Something in the powerful stranger's posture, the way he stood, as if the whole city belonged to him yet carried invisible weight, drew her. Before Emma could stop her, Lily stepped closer, her small hands reaching out in the innocent way only a child could. She placed her palms gently over Vin's large, scarred hands, as if offering the only gift she had: warmth. The contact was electric. For the first time in a decade, a faint tingle raced through Vin's fingers. Not full feeling, but a spark warmth bleeding through the numbness like sunlight piercing fog. His breath caught sharply. An overwhelming surge of paternal love flooded him. Passionate and intense, burning away layers of ice he had thought permanent. This was no mere attraction. It was the raw soul. Deep recognition of a father finding a piece of what he had lost. Violent inner conflict exploded within him. "She is not mine. I cannot drag them into my world. But how can I leave them here in this hell?" Remorse for his past failures clashed violently with a sudden ferocious need to protect. His empire's wealth, private jets, offshore accounts, armed compounds felt obscene next to the girl's bare feet and her mother's shivering form. Emma watched in horror and heightened curiosity, her heart pounding with anxiety. Who was this man? Why did he look at Lily with such raw intensity? Confusion and fear warred inside her, making her dizzy. She stepped forward protectively, voice barely above a whisper. "Lily, come back. We don't know him." Yet even as she spoke, a fragile spark of guarded hope flickered. No one had looked at her children with anything but pity or disgust in years. Before Vin could respond, headlights swept the alley. Another confrontation erupted without warning. Ricci's crew, 2 cars this time, had followed him, hoping to catch the Don vulnerable. Tires screeched as doors opened. Words flew sharp and ugly across the narrow space, accusations about territory and respect. Vin's bodyguards materialized instantly from a second vehicle that had trailed at distance, forming a tense wall. No shots were fired, but the air thickened with threat. One of Ricci's men gestured aggressively toward the family, mocking their poverty with a cruel laugh. "Look at this trash, boss. Even you picking up strays now." The absurdity of the injustice burned through Emma. Here she was already broken by eviction hunger and endless nights of cold wind slicing through cardboard shelters, now caught in the crossfire of powerful men. She gathered the children close her malnourished body, trembling not just from cold, but from the numbing realization of how little control she had. Lily pressed closer to Vin instinctively, her small hand still linked with his. Noah, the loyal best friend, stood guard beside Emma, his young face hardened with suspicion. Vin moved with calm authority, stepping between the rivals and the family. His voice carried quiet steel. "This is not their fight. Walk away." The command, delivered without raised volume, carried the weight of his empire. After a few more tense exchanges, and a subtle signal from Vin's men, the rivals retreated into the night, but not before delivering a parting threat that promised future trouble. The encounter left Vin's inner world in fresh chaos. Protecting this family in plain sight risked exposing them to his enemies, yet walking away felt like repeating the failure that had cost him his own daughter. The paternal bond forming with Lily tore at him with new intensity, fierce, protective, and utterly unexpected. Later that night, after ensuring the rivals had truly gone, Vin arranged discreet help. Cash was left anonymously near the family's makeshift shelter, enough for a few nights in a cheap motel and warm meals, but he did not reveal himself fully. From the shadows of his SUV, he watched as Emma discovered the envelope. Her reaction was a quiet, condensed moment of emotional stillness, tears slipping silently down her hollow cheeks as she clutched the money, disbelief mixing with overwhelming relief. "Kids. Someone saw us," she whispered, voice breaking with timid gratitude and deep disorientation. For the first time in months, the children would sleep with full bellies and a roof. Yet the drama escalated in the following days. Weeks later, another unjust blow struck Emma. The diner where she worked cut her hours without notice, claiming slow business, leaving her once again scavenging for food at closing time. The twins fell ill from the damp alley nights, their coughs echoing pitifully. Lily continued dancing in the park each evening, drawing small crowds for coins. Her bare feet now wrapped in makeshift rags, Emma had torn from her own shirt. Noah remained fiercely guarded, warning Lily in hushed tones. Powerful men don't help for free. He'll hurt us. Vin returned often, always at a distance at first, then closer. Each encounter deepened the father-child pull toward Lily. He arranged better shelter, secretly moving them to a modest but clean apartment through intermediaries, while battling his own violent inner conflict. My world destroys everything it touches, but leaving them here is another kind of murder. His wealth displayed itself in quiet power. A new winter coat left for Emma, warm boots for the children, groceries that appeared as if by magic. The gap between his penthouse luxury crystal chandeliers, heated marble floors, views of the glittering lake, and their previous cardboard existence grew starker with every act. One evening, as autumn leaves began to fall, Emma finally confronted him in the park. Her voice was soft, polite, yet laced with fearful curiosity. "Why are you doing this, sir? We have nothing to offer." Vin looked at Lily, who was teaching the twins a silly dance move, and felt the paternal love surge again, deeper and more protective. The inner tearing reached a new peak, remorse for his past, blended with fierce determination to shield this vulnerable family from the streets that had nearly broken them. In that quiet park moment, amid the contrast of extreme poverty and hidden power, the rescue had truly begun. Vin Callahan, the numbed-on of Chicago, had found a reason to feel again. And Emma Thompson, the resilient mother who had endured every humiliation, dared to hope that perhaps for once kindness from the powerful might not come with chains. Weeks later, the modest apartment Vin had secretly arranged for Emma, and the children stood on the edge of a quieter South Side neighborhood. It was far from luxury, but after the cardboard alleys it felt like a sanctuary. Fresh paint covered old cracks and warm blankets replaced the threadbare ones. Yet even here the shadow of old miseries lingered. Emma woke before dawn most mornings, her thin frame still aching from months of malnutrition, preparing simple oatmeal for the children while fighting the constant fear that this fragile safety could vanish like morning mist. That particular morning, Vin arrived unannounced. His sleek black SUV idled outside, a stark contrast to the faded brick buildings and cracked sidewalks. He had come under the pretense of checking on their well-being, but the truth burned hotter inside him. The faint tingle in his hands from Lily's touch days earlier had not faded. It haunted his every waking hour, stirring a paternal longing so profound it left him breathless in the quiet of his penthouse. Emma answered the door in her worn waitress uniform, her eyes widening with a mix of guarded curiosity and lingering anxiety. Her voice came soft and timid as always when addressing someone whose power she could not begin to measure. "Mr. Callahan, I didn't expect you. The children are still eating breakfast. Please come in if you'd like." She stepped aside, her malnourished shoulders tense, one hand unconsciously steadying herself against the doorframe as a wave of dizziness washed over her. The absurdity of her situation struck again yesterday. The utility company had threatened to cut power over a delayed bill she had scraped together from tips only for an anonymous payment to appear just in time. Another unfair twist in a life defined by them. Vin entered his presence, filling the small living room. The disparity felt almost cruel, his tailored wool coat and polished shoes against the second-hand furniture and the faint scent of cheap coffee. Inside his chest, remorse gnawed with fresh teeth. "I live in marble and glass while she fights for electricity." The violent conflict raged his empire, demanded distance, yet the fatherly pull toward Lily grew stronger, more desperate, like a tide threatening to drown him. Lily bounded in first, her bare feet padding across the linoleum, face lighting up with innocent joy. "You came back." She threw her small arms around his leg in a quick hug before Emma could intervene. Noah hovered in the doorway, arms crossed his young face, a mask of deep suspicion. The twins peeked from behind their mother, wide-eyed and curious. In that condensed moment of stillness, Vin felt his heart twist in a new way, not just protection, but an inexplicable recognition that shook him to his core. Later that afternoon, after the children had gone to play in the small fenced yard, Emma finally spoke the words that had weighed on her for years. They sat at the tiny kitchen table, 2 mugs of coffee between them. Her hands trembled as she clutched her voice barely above a whisper. "I need to tell you something, sir. Something I've carried alone for so long it feels like it's crushing my bones." Horror and shock flickered across her face as she forced the truth out, her body swaying slightly with emotional vertigo. "Lily, she's yours. Your daughter. From one night years ago, before everything went dark in your world. I was terrified to tell you. Your life. It was too dangerous. I thought I was protecting her by disappearing. The revelation landed like a silent explosion. Vin's world tilted. His numb hands gripped the edge of the table until the wood creaked. A surge of overwhelming paternal love, fierce, burning, all-consuming, crashed through him, mingled with a psychological shock so intense it left him numb in a different way. My daughter. Alive. Dancing in the streets while I mourned a ghost. Violent inner conflict tore through his soul, gnawing remorse for the years stolen. Rage at the lies fed to him after his wife's death, and a profound protective tenderness that made his chest ache with unfamiliar warmth. He had failed his first family, and now the universe had returned a piece of it in the form of this resilient dancing child. Emma watched him, fear and confusion swirling in her exhausted eyes. I was desperate back then, alone, broke, sleeping in shelters. When I found out I was pregnant, I ran. Every night in the cold wind, I wondered if I had done right. Seeing you help us, it terrified me. What if you took her away? What if your enemies came for her? Her voice cracked with deep disorientation, the humiliation of her past poverty laid bare. She had endured nights where hunger made her vision blur and her limbs shake, all while hiding the truth from a man who could have changed everything. Vin rose slowly, pacing the small kitchen. His empire's wealth pressed in on him. Offshore accounts holding sums that could erase her suffering in a heartbeat. Private security that could shield them forever. Yet it felt hollow against the reality of Emma's threadbare courage. Another unreasonable blow had struck her. Only days earlier, a predatory landlord had tried to evict them from this new apartment with fabricated complaints, forcing Emma to beg at the management office while the children waited outside in the rain. The memory fueled his inner storm. How many more cruelties must she endure before I step fully into this? Before he could respond, his phone vibrated. A tense street confrontation was unfolding across town. Ricci's men had ambushed one of his lieutenants at a neutral warehouse near the river, demanding more territory and mocking Vin's recent softness. Vin excused himself, but not before promising Emma he would return. "This changes nothing about my promise to protect them," he said, voice steady despite the chaos inside. That evening, the confrontation escalated in a bold, unexpected way. Vin arrived at the industrial stretch as shadows lengthened. Words flew sharp across the loading dock. Accusations of weakness veiled threats about family vulnerabilities. One of Ricci's enforcers stepped too close, gesturing crudely toward rumors of Vin's new charity cases. The air crackled with suspense, but Vin's men held the line without bloodshed. He stared the rival down, his presence alone forcing a tense retreat. Yet the encounter left him shaken in a new way. They sensed the crack in my armor. If they learn Lily is my blood, the danger multiplies. The paternal love now burned with added ferocity. A father's fierce determination clashing violently with the calculated caution of a Don. Later that night, back at the apartment, Vin returned with groceries and warm coats. The children had fallen asleep, but Emma sat waiting, her face etched with quiet exhaustion. In the soft glow of a single lamp, another moment of condensed emotional stillness settled. Vin showed her documents, old photographs, medical records from the night of his wife's murder that now made horrifying sense. The lieutenant who had reported his daughter dead had lied, likely on orders from a long-gone rival. The truth unraveled, further deepening Vin's remorse into something almost unbearable. Emma listened, tears slipping silently. Shock and profound confusion left her dizzy. She gripped the table as numbness spread through her limbs. From deep suspicion, born of years on the streets, an overwhelming trust began to bloom, intense and attachment, forming the desperate gratitude of a mother who had carried unbearable burdens alone, now shared with a man of immense power. "I was so scared for her," she whispered, voice timid and polite, even in vulnerability. "But seeing how you look at her, like she's the most precious thing in your world, it heals something in me." Vin knelt beside her chair, not in romance, but in solemn responsibility. His inner world fractured, further violent conflict between the empire that demanded isolation and the fatherly bond that demanded everything. He felt the first true stirrings of sensation returning to his fingertips, faint but real, as if Lily's blood connection had begun thawing what grief had frozen. Guilt for the lost years tore at him with fresh agony, yet hope, raw and unprecedented, pushed through. In the quiet hours before dawn, as Vin stood at the apartment window overlooking the sleeping city, the full weight settled. Lily was his daughter. The small dancer who had pierced his numbness carried his blood. The rescue had transformed into something far deeper, a second chance at fatherhood forged in the crucible of Chicago's unforgiving streets. Emma's pitiful past and his overwhelming wealth stood in sharper contrast than ever, but for the first time, they pointed toward healing rather than division. The revelation had shattered old silences. What came next would test every fragment of Vin's fractured heart. Later that night, after the weight of the revelation had settled like heavy fog over the city, Vincent Callahan returned to his lakeshore penthouse. The glittering Chicago skyline stretched below him, a kingdom of lights and shadows he commanded with a word. Yet tonight the marble floors felt colder under his shoes, the crystal decanters of aged whiskey untouched. His hands, still mostly numb, rested on the balcony railing as a new torment clawed deeper than before. My own daughter has been surviving on scraps while I drowned in power. The remorse was no longer a dull ache, but a sharp blade turning slowly in his chest, carving fresh guilt with every breath. He had ordered discreet protection for the apartment men, watching from unmarked cars, but the violent conflict inside him raged on. Reveal himself fully, and risk dragging them into his war, or keep distance, and betray the fatherly bond now, burning like wildfire in his veins. The next morning, Emma stood at the apartment window, watching a delivery van unload boxes of groceries, new clothes, and even a small television. Her malnourished frame trembled as she clutched the edge of the curtain. Another absurdly unfair blow had struck only hours earlier. A collections agency had frozen her meager bank account over an old hospital debt from when the twins were born, leaving her with nothing but lint in her pockets. The sudden abundance confused her to the point of dizziness. She steadied herself against the wall, a wave of numbness spreading through her legs from exhaustion and shock. Why would someone do this? She whispered, voice soft and timid, afraid to believe in kindness that came without visible price. Lily, however, moved with unfiltered certainty. She danced around the living room in her new sneakers, spinning like a joyful windmill, her laughter filling the space in ways the thin walls had never known. "It's him, Mama," the tall man with sad eyes. "He's watching over us." Noah stood apart, his 9-year-old face tight with guarded fear. "We can't trust him," he muttered, pulling Lily aside later that afternoon. "Powerful men always want something. Remember the last landlord, smiling one day, throwing us out the next." When Emma's back was turned, Noah tugged Lily toward the door, attempting to slip away to the park. "We'll be safer on our own. I know places." Emma caught them at the threshold, horror flashing across her hollow features. The thought of losing Lily now, after years of protecting her secret, sent anxiety surging through her like ice water. She dropped to her knees, voice breaking into a polite, trembling plea. "Please, babies. Not yet. Let's just see." Deep inside, her heart tore between desperate gratitude and the crushing fear of new betrayal. She had endured too many cold, wind-bitten nights to surrender her children easily. Weeks later, Vin arranged a supervised visit in a quiet corner of a public park near the lakefront. He kept his distance at first, watching from a shaded bench while his security team blended into the background. Lily spotted him immediately and ran over her small hand, slipping into his with innocent trust. The faint tingle in his fingers returned stronger, a fragile bridge across the numbness. An overwhelming paternal attachment surged through him, fierce and protective, unlike anything he had allowed himself since the loss of his wife and presumed dead child. "She is mine, flesh of my blood, and I am still choosing shadows over claiming her." The inner conflict escalated into something almost violent, remorse and longing colliding until his breath grew shallow. Emma approached more slowly, carrying a small container of homemade oatmeal cookies she had baked with the new supplies. Her steps were hesitant, her thin body still showing the marks of long-term hunger, prominent collarbones, wrists like brittle twigs. She offered the cookies with downcast eyes, voice soft and polite. "I made these for you, Mr. Callahan. It's not much, but thank you for everything." Curiosity warred with lingering fear in her gaze. Part of her wanted to demand answers, to understand why a man of such obvious wealth would bother with a broken family like theirs. Another part, shaped by years of powerlessness, simply waited for the other shoe to drop. Before Vin could reply, tension erupted from an unexpected direction. Noah, who had followed at a distance, suddenly bolted forward and grabbed Lily's arm. "We're leaving. Now." The boy's distrust had hardened into action. He had overheard whispers from neighborhood kids about dangerous men in suits, and feared the worst. In the scuffle, Lily stumbled, scraping her knee on the pavement. Emma rushed in, pulling the children close, her face pale with fresh anxiety and disorientation. The small injury, though minor, reopened every humiliating memory of powerless nights when she could not even afford bandages. Vin's protective instinct flared with new intensity. He knelt carefully, offering a clean handkerchief from his pocket. Monogrammed silk worth more than Emma's monthly rent had once been. "It's all right," he said quietly, his voice carrying the calm authority of a man who moved mountains, yet now trembled internally at the sight of his daughter's tears. The contrast struck him again, his empire's boundless resources against this family's fragile new beginning. His penthouse held rooms larger than their entire apartment, heated floors, and staff who anticipated every need, while Emma still flinched at sudden noises, expecting cruelty. That same evening, another street confrontation tested the fragile trust. Vin had been called to a tense meeting at an old rail yard on the industrial edge of the city. Ricci's representatives arrived in force, their cars blocking the exits in a bold show of pressure. Words cut through the cooling air, demands for territory, sneering remarks about Vin's new distractions. One man stepped forward, gesturing mockingly toward rumors of a woman and children. "Family makes a man weak, Callahan. Easy to hit where it hurts." The air thickened with suspense as Vin's team formed a quiet perimeter. No blows were exchanged, but the psychological game was brutal. Vin held his ground with measured words, forcing the rivals to back down, yet the encounter left fresh scars on his soul. "They are circling closer. If they discover Lily is my blood, the danger becomes unbearable." Later that night, back at the apartment, Vin sat in the modest living room while the children slept. Emma stood by the kitchen counter washing dishes with careful, exhausted movements. Another unjust blow had landed earlier that day. Her old diner boss had spread rumors that kept her from new waitress jobs, punishing her for abandoning shifts during the eviction chaos. She moved with the slow grace of someone perpetually sleep-deprived, fighting dizziness as she worked. In a quiet, condensed moment of emotional stillness, she turned to Vin. "I was so scared when you first appeared," she admitted, voice timid, yet gaining a thread of genuine attachment. "But watching Lily smile again, it's changing us. Changing me." The words carried the weight of a woman transitioning from guarded survival to tentative hope. Vin felt the fatherly love for Lily intensify into something soul-shaking. He wanted to tell Emma everything about the faked reports, the lost years, but the violent conflict held him back. Revealing too much too soon could shatter the delicate trust. His wealth pressed heavier on his conscience. He had already transferred funds to secure their future, anonymously arranged private doctors for the children's lingering coughs, and upgraded their security without their full knowledge. Yet none of it erased the remorse gnawing at him for the decade of separation. Noah's distrust created fresh drama the following afternoon. The boy attempted another runaway plan, packing a small bag and convincing Lily to meet him at the park just to be safe. Emma discovered the plan in time, collapsing into a chair with shock and inner torment that left her numb and breathless. "Why won't the world let us rest?" she whispered, tears falling as she hugged her children close. The humiliation of her powerlessness returned in waves once again, relying on a powerful stranger, while her own strength felt insufficient. Vin intervened quietly, speaking to Noah alone on the small balcony. He did not threaten or bribe. Instead, he shared a sliver of truth. "I lost someone once. Someone very small. I won't let that happen again." The boy's suspicion cracked, slightly replaced by wary curiosity. In that exchange, reluctant trust took another cautious step forward. As autumn deepened, the tension continued rising like a gathering storm. Vin balanced his empire's demands with stolen moments near the family, each one deepening the paternal bond with Lily, while escalating the risks from Ricci's faction. Emma's transformation from desperate poverty to guarded hope remained fragile, her inner world still torn between gratitude and the fear of losing everything again. The rescue had begun in earnest, but the path ahead was lined with shadows, both from the streets and from the violent conflicts tearing through Vincent Callahan's once numb heart. Later that night, after Noah's latest escape attempt had been gently diffused, Vincent Callahan made a decision that shifted the delicate balance forever. From the quiet of his penthouse, he sent word through a trusted intermediary. The modest apartment was no longer enough. He invited the entire family to his fortified lakeshore compound for a single afternoon visit, framed as a safe place for the children to play away from the city's watchful eyes. Emma accepted with trembling hands and a soft, timid, "Thank you, Mr. Callahan," her voice carrying layers of lingering fear wrapped in growing attachment. The next morning, the black SUV convoy arrived at the apartment building. Emma stepped out, first clutching a small bag of homemade sandwiches, her malnourished body still moving, with the cautious gait of someone who had survived too many sudden losses. The twins, Mia and Max, bounced with wide-eyed wonder at the gleaming vehicles, while Lily held Noah's hand tightly. The boy remained guarded, his eyes darting toward every shadow, whispering warnings only Lily could hear. As they entered the private elevator rising toward the upper floors, Emma felt a fresh wave of deep disorientation. The polished marble and soft lighting pressed in on her, a dizzying reminder of how far removed this world was from the wind-bitten alleys where she had once huddled with her children under plastic sheeting. When the doors opened directly into the sprawling private garden terrace overlooking Lake Michigan, the contrast became almost overwhelming. Heated stone paths wound between manicured greenery and a small fountain. A table had been laid with fresh fruit, warm pastries, and pitchers of juice items that once would have seemed like impossible luxuries. Vin stood waiting in a simple dark sweater, his powerful frame somehow less intimidating in this domestic setting. His inner torment had evolved into something sharper, more relentless. The gnawing remorse of knowing his blood ran in Lily's veins while he had lived in isolated splendor. They should have grown up here, surrounded by safety, not scraping by on nothing. The fatherly love surged with new ferocity, a burning need to shield them that clashed violently with the calculated risks of his empire. Lily broke free, first running across the grass in her new shoes, her laughter echoing off the glass walls. She tugged Vin's hand, insisting he join her silly routine, a clumsy imitation of a baseball pitcher winding up. The twins followed, giggling as they chased after her. For the first time, the fortress echoed with the pure sounds of childhood. Noah hung back near Emma, arms crossed, but his eyes betrayed reluctant curiosity as he watched Vin patiently mimic Lily's exaggerated wind-up. Emma stood in quiet, condensed emotional stillness beside a flowering planter, her thin fingers tracing the soft petals. Another unjust blow had struck only the day before a social services letter had arrived, questioning her fitness as a mother due to past housing instability, threatening an investigation that could upend everything. The humiliation burned fresh, being judged while barely keeping her children fed and clothed. Yet here in this moment, she felt the slow thaw of overwhelming trust. "This is more than I ever imagined," she said softly when Vin approached her, voice polite and laced with genuine wonder. Confusion still lingered, but the fear had begun transforming into something warmer, more attached. As the days stretched into weeks later, the visits became regular. The children flooded the fortress almost daily, turning the once silent terraces and secure play areas into spaces of life. Mia and Max discovered a corner with coloring supplies and spent hours creating drawings of big houses with lakes, their small voices filling the air. Lily taught Vin a new dance move inspired by street performers she had once watched for coins. Her bare feet now safely protected, but her spirit as free as ever. Noah, still wary, eventually joined a game of catch with a brand new baseball and glove items worth more than everything Emma had once owned. Each throw that Vin returned gently chipped at the boys' defenses. One golden afternoon, while the children played, Vin stood with Emma on a shaded balcony overlooking the lake. The wealth around them felt heavier than ever original artwork on the walls. A climate-controlled wine cellar visible through glass doors, staff who moved with silent efficiency. Emma's gaze drifted across it all, a fresh wave of psychological shock, making her grip the railing as dizziness returned. "I used to count coins for bread," she whispered, voice timid. "Now my babies are playing in a place like this. It doesn't feel real." The inner tearing for her was profound gratitude, so intense, it hurt mixed with the lingering terror that it could all disappear with one wrong word. Vin's response came from a place of deepening torment. The remorse had grown into a constant, violent undercurrent. Every laugh from Lily reminded him of the decades stolen, every grateful glance from Emma amplified his sense of failure. "I built this fortress to protect what I loved, yet it kept me from the one thing that could have saved me." His paternal bond with Lily intensified during these visits. He found himself memorizing the way she tilted her head when concentrating, the exact pitch of her delighted squeals. The love was pure, protective, all-consuming, a father rediscovering his heart through his daughter's joy. Yet tension refused to stay outside the gates. Later that night, after the family had been driven home, Vin was pulled into another bold street confrontation. Ricci's men had blocked a key supply route near the riverfront, forcing a tense standoff in an empty parking lot under sodium lights. Accusations flew about leaking information and weakened leadership. One rival stepped forward with a mocking smile, hinting at new weaknesses in Vin's life. The air crackled with suspense as Vin's team formed a protective circle. No violence erupted, but the psychological pressure mounted, clear threats wrapped in civilized words. Vin diffused it with measured authority, yet the encounter left him reeling with fresh inner conflict. They are getting closer. Every visit puts them at greater risk. The following afternoon brought another absurdly unfair blow to Emma. A sudden city inspection at her old diner job resulted in her final paycheck being withheld over a technicality, leaving her once again staring at empty cupboards despite the support Vin provided. She arrived at the compound that evening with red-rimmed eyes, trying to hide her despair. In the garden, as the children played a noisy game of tag, she sat on a stone bench in another moment of condensed stillness, fighting numbness in her limbs. Vin joined her, quietly listening as she spoke in her soft, polite tone. "Sometimes I still wake up expecting the cold wind on my face," she confessed. The fear doesn't leave easily. Her attachment to this new reality had grown burning and passionate, not for wealth itself, but for the safety it represented for her children. The mindset of someone lifted from absolute poverty created its own storm, overwhelming disbelief mixed with fierce determination to prove herself worthy. Vin felt the tearing inside him reach new depths. Watching Noah finally laugh at one of Lily's silly falls, seeing the twins curl up trustingly near him during a story time, he understood the stakes more clearly than ever. His empire's power could shield them, yet it also endangered them. The fatherly love for Lily had become his anchor, a fierce light cutting through the remorse. As weeks passed, the children's presence transformed the fortress. Crayon drawings adorned secure office walls. Laughter replaced echoing silence. Even the staff moved with lighter steps. Noah's distrust softened further after Vin quietly helped him with a school enrollment issue, proving through actions rather than words that protection could exist without chains. One quiet evening, as the sun painted the lake in hues of gold, Lily climbed into Vin's lap on the terrace, resting her head against his chest. "You feel warm now," she said simply. In that single sentence, the emotional core solidified. Vin's hands, still fighting the numbness, rested gently on her back. The violent inner conflict, remorse, protection, responsibility raged on, but something new had taken root: hope. Emma watched from across the garden, her heart swelling with a trust that burned away the last shadows of suspicion. The rescue had deepened into something enduring. The children had not only flooded the fortress, they had begun to heal the man who ruled it. Yet outside the high walls, the storms continued gathering. The path forward remained fraught, but for the first time in years, Vincent Callahan's numb empire felt alive with possibility. Later that night, after the children had been driven home under quiet escort, Vincent Callahan remained alone on the illuminated terrace. The lake wind carried distant city sounds into his fortress, but inside him a different storm brewed. The laughter that had filled the space earlier now echoed in his memory, stirring a fatherly tenderness so profound it bordered on pain. Lily's small hand in his, the way she had looked up at him with complete acceptance. These moments carved deeper into his soul than any rival's threat. "She calls me by name, yet I am her father. And still I hide behind half-truths." The remorse gnawed with renewed ferocity, blending with a fierce protective love that made his chest feel too small for his heart. The next morning, Emma arrived at the compound with the children for another visit, carrying a small basket of fresh-baked muffins she had prepared in the apartment's modest kitchen. Her steps were lighter than before, yet her thin frame still bore the visible toll of years of deprivation, sunken cheeks, shoulders that carried invisible burdens. Only days earlier, an absurdly unfair letter from a collections agency had arrived, demanding payment for medical bills she had incurred during the twins' premature birth, threatening to garnish future wages she did not yet have. The humiliation had left her curled on the apartment floor in silent tears, questioning how a mother who had endured countless cold, wind-lashed nights could still be punished for simply trying to survive. In the sunlit kitchen of the penthouse, Lily pulled Vin toward the large refrigerator with determined excitement. "Close your eyes, Mr. Vin," she said, her voice bright with innocent authority. She placed a small ice cube from the freezer into his large palm, then followed it with a warm chocolate chip cookie straight from the oven. "Tell me what you feel." The simple exercise, born of a child's pure desire to share wonder, sent faint but unmistakable sensations racing through his fingertips. Cold sharpness followed by gentle heat. Vin's breath caught. The numbness, once absolute, was yielding in tiny, miraculous increments. An overwhelming paternal surge filled him, passionate and intense, as he looked down at his daughter's hopeful face. Violent inner conflict tore through him. Joy at these first stirrings of feeling clashed with crushing remorse for all the years he had not been there to hold her tiny hands. Emma watched from the doorway, her soft, timid voice breaking the quiet. "She's never shown anyone that before. Not like this." Curiosity and deepening attachment shone in her eyes, though a flicker of old fear remained. The disparity struck her anew, the marble countertops and professional appliances around them, versus the single hot plate she had once used in alley shelters. Dizziness washed over her as the emotional weight settled. She steadied herself against the doorframe, fighting the familiar numbness in her limbs. As weeks later, unfolded private moments between Vin and Lily multiplied. One golden afternoon on the terrace, Lily insisted on teaching him how to draw with crayons, the same ones the twins had used. She guided his still partially numb fingers across paper, creating crooked hearts and stick figure families. "This one is us," she declared, adding a tall figure beside 4 smaller ones. Vin felt his throat tighten with a new depth of emotion, raw, fatherly pride mixed with anguish over the lost time. The inner tearing intensified every innocent gesture from Lily, highlighted his past failures as a protector, yet also kindled a fierce resolve to be the father she deserved now. Meanwhile, Noah's guarded shell began to crack in an unexpected way. One evening after a visit, the boy had slipped away from the drop-off point drawn back toward old neighborhood streets by lingering loyalty to friends in trouble. A group of older boys from a local gang cornered him near an underpass, demanding he join them or face consequences. The situation escalated into tense shouts and shoves. Vin, who had been monitoring discreetly, intervened through his team without revealing himself fully. The rivals were dispersed with calm authority and firm warnings. No blows landed, but the message was clear. Later that night, when Noah returned, shaken to the apartment, a quiet conversation with Emma revealed the truth. The boy sat in stunned silence, his distrust softening into wary gratitude. "He helped me without wanting anything back," Noah admitted, voice small. The twins, Mia and Max, added their own gentle warmth. They had taken to calling Vin Uncle Vin during story time in the Fortress Library, a room lined with leather-bound books and soft reading lamps that cost more than Emma had earned in 2 years. One quiet evening, Max climbed into Vin's lap uninvited, pressing a crumpled drawing of a superhero into his hand. "For you, Uncle Vin. So you don't feel sad anymore." The simple gesture unleashed fresh psychological shock in Vin, violent conflict between the ruthless Don the city feared and the father awakening inside him. His empire's wealth, private planes on standby accounts holding fortunes that could reshape entire neighborhoods, felt meaningless compared to the trust these children offered so freely. Emma experienced her own profound shifts during these deepening days. One afternoon after another, unreasonable blow. An old employer spreading malicious rumors that cost her a promising new job interview. She arrived at the compound, exhausted and hollow-eyed. In a condensed moment of emotional stillness beside the fountain, she spoke with polite hesitation. "I keep waiting for the moment when this all disappears. Like every good thing before." Her voice trembled with the mindset of someone lifted from absolute poverty, overwhelming attachment to this protection, warred with deep-seated anxiety that she might not deserve it. Vin listened, his paternal focus on Lily expanding naturally to encompass the entire family's healing, though his heart remained most fiercely anchored to his daughter. Later that night, another bold street confrontation pulled Vin away. Ricci's faction had staged an unexpected roadblock near a key warehouse district, their vehicles forming a deliberate barrier under dim streetlights. Sharp words were exchanged about shifting loyalties and perceived weaknesses. One rival leaned from his window with a cold smile, probing for personal details. Vin diffused the tension with measured presence and strategic calm, forcing the group to disperse without escalation. Yet the encounter left fresh torment in its wake. "Every shadow that falls on them is my fault." The father-child bond with Lily now fueled a deeper, more desperate inner war remorse, transforming into an almost violent determination to dismantle threats before they could reach her. In the following days, small rituals solidified the bond. Lily would press her warm palms against Vin's during quiet moments, whispering, "Feel that. That's me saying I'm here." These touches sent stronger signals through his hands, the numbness retreating further. Vin found himself sharing fragments of stories, not of his empire, but of simple joys he remembered from before his world darkened. The twins listened with rapt attention, Noah occasionally adding cautious questions, and Emma watched with burning, passionate trust that had replaced her earlier suspicion. One crisp evening, as the family gathered for dinner in the fortress dining room, its long table set with linens and silver that gleamed under crystal chandeliers, Lily leaned against Vin's side. "You're getting better at feeling things," she said softly. In that instant, the emotional core of the story pulsed with new life. Vin's heart tore open wider than ever, gnawing remorse for the past, fierce protective love for the present, and a soul-deep commitment to the future. Emma's eyes met his across the table, carrying silent understanding and gratitude for the man who had lifted them from humiliation into safety. The children had not only flooded the fortress. Through Lily's innocent guidance and the family's collective warmth, they were slowly teaching a powerful, broken man how to feel again. The bond between father and daughter deepened with every shared laugh, every gentle touch, every quiet victory over numbness, both physical and emotional. Yet beyond the high walls, the gathering storms of the outside world continued to build. The rescue had become something far greater, a second chance at family forged in tenderness and tested by shadows. Later that night, after the children had returned home, and the fortress fell back into its familiar, quiet, Vincent Callahan stood alone in the vast kitchen. The faint sensations in his hands from Lily's earlier touches lingered like distant echoes, taunting him with possibility. The fatherly bond that had been deepening with every visit now felt like a living flame inside his chest, illuminating corners of his soul he had long kept in darkness. "She is teaching me to feel again, yet I still carry the weight of every missed year." The remorse had sharpened into something almost unbearable, a violent tearing that left him pacing the marble floors until the early hours. The next morning dawned bright and warm, perfect for the private gathering Vin had arranged. He invited the family for a backyard barbecue on the secure terrace garden, transforming the space with colorful lanterns, a large grill and tables laden with classic American fare, thick hot dogs, fresh buns, homemade lemonade, and bowls of sawan enar, potato salad. Emma arrived looking both overwhelmed and quietly radiant, her thin frame still marked by the lingering effects of long-term hunger. Only the day before, another cruel twist had struck. A bureaucratic error at the welfare office had frozen her benefits over a paperwork technicality, leaving her staring at empty kitchen cabinets once more. The humiliation of standing in line for emergency food assistance, explaining her situation to indifferent clerks while her children waited outside, had left fresh tears on her pillow through another sleep-deprived night. As the children explored the garden, Lily's energy lit up the space. She insisted on helping Vin at the grill, dragging a small step stool beside him. "I can do it too," she declared, her small hands reaching for the tongs. Vin smiled, despite the storm inside him, his powerful frame moving with careful gentleness. The contrast was stark, his world of imported grills worth thousands, private chefs on call, and views stretching across Lake Michigan, versus Emma's years of scavenging scraps from diner trash bins after closing shifts. Emma sat nearby on a cushioned lounge chair, watching with soft, timid wonder. Her voice carried polite gratitude when she spoke. "This feels like a dream I'm afraid to wake from." Curiosity and deepening attachment shone through her exhaustion, though anxiety still flickered at the edges. The mindset of sudden protection after absolute poverty created its own quiet turmoil. She felt both profoundly grateful and strangely unworthy, her heart caught between joy and the fear of inevitable loss. As Vin flipped burgers with his still imperfect hands, one slipped from the tongs. Lily immediately placed her small, warm palms over his larger ones, steadying them with innocent determination. "Like this, Daddy, I mean Mr. Vin," she corrected herself shyly, but the word had already slipped out. In that instant, something profound shifted. A rush of full sensation flooded Vin's fingers, heat from the grill, the texture of the metal tongs, and most powerfully, the living warmth of his daughter's touch. Strength returned in a wave, purposeful and real, allowing him to grip firmly for the first time in a decade. Tears welled in his eyes, raw and unashamed, as he felt her pulse through his skin. The fatherly love surged with overwhelming intensity, a passionate protective fire that burned away layers of numbness. Violent inner conflict exploded within him. Immense joy at this physical breakthrough clashed with gnawing remorse for all the times he had not been there to hold her hands as a baby. "My own child is healing what doctors and power could not." The emotional tearing reached new, almost violent depths, leaving him momentarily unsteady despite his powerful stature. Emma witnessed the moment in condensed emotional stillness, her hand rising to her mouth. Shock and profound disorientation washed over her dizziness, making the world tilt as she rose halfway from her chair. The man who had lifted them from the gutters was crying real tears because of her daughter's touch. Attachment burned brighter than ever, passionate and fierce, born from years of powerless desperation, now met with this overwhelming protection. Noah, who had been tossing a baseball with the twins, paused. His lingering distrust softened further as he watched Vin compose himself and continue grilling with newfound ease. Later that afternoon, the boy pulled Vin aside near the fountain. "You really mean it, don't you? About keeping us safe?" Vin's response was quiet and sincere, strengthening the fragile bridge between them. Weeks later, the breakthrough continued to unfold in tender increments. During another visit, the twins insisted on a game of tag across the garden. Lily led Vin by the hand, her grip confident. Each time their palms met, sensation strengthened cool grass underfoot when he removed his shoes at her request, the smooth texture of a baseball, the gentle breeze he could now truly register. These small victories amplified his inner torment. The wealth surrounding them, heated garden paths, a custom playground installed discreetly, security that rivaled government protection, felt both redemptive and accusatory. He had the power to give them everything, yet the years of their suffering in cold alleys haunted him with fresh agony. One evening, as the sun dipped toward the lake, another unreasonable blow struck Emma. A former landlord had tracked her down, demanding fabricated late fees from their old eviction, with threats of legal action. She arrived at the compound visibly shaken, her malnourished body trembling as she fought waves of anxiety and numbness. In a quiet moment beside Vin on the terrace, her soft voice carried deep vulnerability. "I keep thinking this can't last, that someone will take it all away again." The psychological shock of her transition from street survival to this Shielded life tore at her internally, gratitude and lingering fear colliding in confusing, numbing waves. Vin felt the father-child bond with Lily deepen into something sacred during these weeks. She had become his anchor, her innocent kindness slowly pulling him from the abyss. One crisp afternoon, while practicing flips on the grill again, Lily pressed both her hands firmly over his. "Feel everything now," she whispered. The sensations returned, even stronger warmth, pressure, the subtle rhythm of her heartbeat. Vin dropped to one knee, pulling her into a gentle embrace as silent tears fell. The remorse was ferocious, but so was the hope now blooming. "She is saving me." Meanwhile, tension from the outside world refused to relent. Later that night, Vin was drawn into yet another bold street confrontation. Ricci's men had staged an unexpected gathering at a neutral dockside location, their boats and vehicles creating a tense perimeter under moonlight. Sharp accusations flew about weakening control and mysterious new priorities. One rival probed too closely about rumors of family, forcing Vin to respond with steel-edged calm. His team maintained a firm but non-violent presence, diffusing the situation through strategic words and visible strength. The encounter heightened the stakes every moment, with Lily now carried the shadow of potential danger, intensifying Vin's violent inner conflict between his empire and his emerging fatherhood. In the days that followed, small miracles continued. Noah fully joined family activities, even defending Lily during a playful argument with the twins. Emma's trust had transformed into a steady, burning attachment, her polite gratitude evolving into quiet partnership in caring for the children. The fortress, once a monument to isolation, now pulsed with life and healing. One quiet evening, as fireworks from a distant neighborhood celebration lit the sky, echoing the spirit of their earlier barbecue, Lily rested her head against Vin's shoulder on the terrace. "Your hands are strong now," she said simply. In that moment, the physical breakthrough mirrored something far deeper, the slow mending of a powerful man's fractured heart through the innocent love of his daughter. The father-child bond had become unbreakable, a source of strength amid gathering storms. Yet Vin knew the true tests still lay ahead, as shadows from his world continued to lengthen across the path he was forging for this newly discovered family. Later that night, after the fireworks had faded and the children had been tucked into the guest rooms of the fortress with stories still lingering in the air, Vincent Callahan received an urgent call that pulled him back into the shadows of his empire. A supposed peace meeting with Ricci's faction had been arranged at an old warehouse district by the river. Vin left with heavy reluctance, promising Emma he would return for the pizza and movie night they had planned for the following evening. As his convoy disappeared into the Chicago darkness, a quiet unease settled over the apartment where the family now stayed under heavier protection. The next morning, Emma moved through the apartment with a new lightness in her step, preparing a small surprise picnic for the promised evening. Yet by late afternoon, worry began to creep in. Vin had not called. The children sensed her tension, especially Lily, who kept glancing at the door. Noah tried to distract everyone with card games, but the absence weighed on them all. Emma's voice remained soft and polite when she reassured them, though inside, old fears stirred horror at the thought that the protection they had come to rely on might vanish as suddenly as it had appeared. When evening arrived and Vin still had not returned or answered messages, the children's concern turned to action. Using a cheap phone Vin had given Noah for emergencies, they tracked the last known location near the river warehouses. Emma, exhausted from another sleepless night, haunted by memories of cold wind and hunger, tried to stop them, but the four children slipped out together while she stepped away for a brief moment. Their small, determined group moved through the streets with the resourcefulness born of former street life, Lily leading with quiet courage, Noah scouting ahead the twins, holding hands tightly. Meanwhile, in the dim, cavernous warehouse, the meeting had turned into a carefully orchestrated trap. Ricci's men had blocked the exits with trucks, their words shifting from negotiation to open challenge. Vin stood surrounded, his powerful presence undiminished even as tension thickened the air. Sharp accusations cut through the space claims of divided loyalty and new vulnerabilities. In a bold, unexpected move, one of Ricci's enforcers fired a single shot that struck Vin in the side before his own men could fully react. Pain exploded through him as he collapsed against a stack of crates, blood seeping through his dark coat. The rivals retreated swiftly into the night, leaving him for dead in the echoing emptiness, believing their message had been delivered. Vin lay there in the growing pool of shadow, his breath shallow. The fatherly love for Lily surged through the haze of pain with ferocious clarity. "I finally found her. I cannot leave her now." Remorse and violent inner conflict tore at him more intensely than the wound itself, gnawing guilt that his world had once again endangered the family he was only beginning to claim. His hands, which had begun to feel again thanks to his daughter, now lay limp and increasingly numb from shock and blood loss. Hours passed in agonizing stillness. Then faint sounds reached him, small footsteps and whispered voices. The children had found the warehouse. Lily's eyes widened in horror as she spotted her father slumped against the crates. "Daddy," she cried, the word escaping without hesitation this time. Noah pulled her back momentarily, his face pale with fear, but the boy's protective instinct kicked in. "We have to help him. Stay quiet." What followed was a scene of pure, desperate heroism that no adult could have planned. While Emma, frantic with anxiety back at the apartment, called Vin's emergency contacts, the children acted. Noah and Lily created a chaotic distraction near the remaining guards, launching into an exaggerated, silly dance routine under the dim security lights, spinning and sliding like street performers, their voices ringing out in deliberately loud, playful songs. The guards, confused and momentarily disarmed by the absurdity of two small children dancing fearlessly in such a place, turned their attention away from the inner warehouse. Meanwhile, the twins, Mia and Max, crawled through a narrow ventilation duct they had spotted from outside their small bodies, fitting where no adult could. With trembling hands and whispered encouragement to each other, they dropped into the room and managed to unlock a side door from within. The effort left them dizzy and scraped but determined. Lily broke free and ran to Vin's side. She dropped to her knees beside him, pressing her tiny warm hands directly over the wound and then over his cold, numb fingers. "Feel me, Daddy. Feel my hands. You have to get up." In that raw, life-altering moment, full sensation roared back through Vin's body like a breaking dam. He felt the sticky warmth of his own blood, the crushing pressure of Lily's desperate grip, and most powerfully, the living heat of his daughter's palms, the same hands that had first sparked life in him. The miraculous return of feeling gave him the strength to rise his powerful frame, fueled by paternal love and raw survival instinct. With Noah supporting one side and Lily refusing to let go of his hand, Vin made it to the unlocked door. The twins had already signaled for help through the open line on the phone. As they emerged into the night air, Vin's remaining men, alerted by Emma's calls, arrived in force. The rivals who had lingered were scattered in a tense, nonviolent standoff, their ambush foiled by the unlikely courage of 4 children. No further shots were fired. The sheer shock of the situation, and Vin's renewed strength, forced a swift retreat. In the armored vehicle racing toward safety, Vin held Lily close, his now sensitive hands cradling her small frame. The father-child bond reached a shattering intensity. He felt every tremble in her body, every tear that fell onto his coat, and the overwhelming surge of protective love mixed with soul-deep remorse threatened to overwhelm him. "My daughter saved my life. The child I failed for 10 years pulled me back from death." The violent inner conflict, piqued joy at their escape, clashed with ferocious guilt that his enemies had come so close to destroying everything. Emma met them at a secure location, her face drained of color from hours of horror and anxiety. She rushed to Vin and the children, pulling them all into a trembling embrace. "I thought I had lost you all," she whispered, voice soft and breaking with polite restraint even in her shock. The mindset of someone lifted from the gutters into sudden protection now faced its greatest test. Deep disorientation and numbness from the terror left her unsteady, yet her attachment burned brighter, forged in fire. Later that night, as doctors tended to Vin in a hidden safe house, the family gathered around his bedside. Lily refused to leave his side, her small hand still linked with his, now fully feeling every precious second. Noah sat quietly, his distrust long gone, replaced by quiet awe. The twins curled up nearby, exhausted but safe. Emma sat in quiet, condensed emotional stillness, stroking Lily's hair while tears slipped down her cheeks. The ambush had nearly ended everything. Instead, it had crystallized the truth. The innocent kindness and courage of these children, especially his daughter, had saved the powerful man who once believed nothing could touch him. The disparity between Vin's empire of wealth and their former life of humiliating poverty had never felt sharper yet. In this moment, it dissolved into something unbreakable. Vin looked at Lily through the haze of pain and medication, his voice rough but steady. "You brought me back." The fatherly love, now tempered by the brush with loss, burned with profound new depth. The inner tearing had reached its most intense point yet, but it no longer threatened to destroy him. It was remaking him. The rescue had become mutual, and the road to full redemption, though still shadowed, now glowed with the light of a family forged in crisis. Later that night, in the secure safe house tucked away on the outskirts of Chicago, Vincent Callahan lay propped against crisp white pillows while soft medical monitors hummed in the background. The wound had been cleaned and stitched by a trusted doctor who asked no questions. Lily refused to leave, his side curled up in a chair pulled close to the bed, her small hand resting lightly on his now sensitive fingers. Every subtle pulse she felt beneath her palm seemed to anchor him to the living world. The fatherly love that had carried him through the ambush now settled into a quieter, more profound ache, one laced with fresh layers of responsibility and wonder. The next morning, Emma moved through the safe house kitchen with careful, exhausted grace. Her thin frame still carried the visible remnants of years of malnutrition, though the safe environment offered food she no longer had to fight for. Only hours earlier, another cruel twist of fate had reached her through a forwarded message. The collections agency had renewed its threats over the old medical debts, garnishing what little remained in her former account despite the new protection. The humiliation stung like salt in an old wound. She had once counted every penny earned from diner tips, while the wind howled through cardboard walls, and now, even in safety, the ghosts of poverty refused to release her completely. She brought Vin a tray of warm broth and fresh bread, her voice soft and polite as she set it down. "The doctor said you need to rest. The children are asking about you every few minutes." Curiosity and deepening attachment shone through her lingering anxiety. The transition from powerless desperation on the streets to this shielded life still left her dizzy at times, her mind reeling with the speed of change. She steadied herself against the bedside table, fighting a wave of emotional numbness that came whenever she remembered how close they had come to losing everything. Vin looked at her with eyes that now held new depths of feeling. The sensations in his hands had stabilized, allowing him to grip the spoon with steady purpose. Yet inside, the remorse had evolved into a relentless inner storm. "My daughter risked her life in that warehouse because of the world I built." The violent conflict between his empire and his fatherhood tore at him with greater force than the bullet had. He wanted to shield them forever, yet every protective measure seemed to pull them deeper into danger. Weeks later, as Vin recovered enough to move between rooms, the family gathered in the safe house living area. The space, though temporary, reflected his wealth in subtle ways. Thick carpets, large windows overlooking wooded grounds, and a stocked pantry that could feed a small army. Lily had taken to reading aloud to him from a children's book about courage, her voice bright against the quiet. Noah joined in occasionally, adding his own commentary, while the twins drew pictures of brave dances that save people. In these moments of condensed emotional stillness, Vin felt the father-child bond with Lily deepen into something sacred and unbreakable. Her innocent kindness had not only saved his body, but was slowly reshaping his soul. One golden afternoon, while the children played a gentle game of catch on the secure lawn, Emma sat with Vin on a shaded porch. Another unreasonable blow had landed that morning. A former neighbor from the south side had sold a fabricated story to a local gossip site about mysterious men watching the family, stirring old fears of exposure. Emma's hands trembled slightly as she spoke, her voice timid, yet carrying new strength. "I used to lie awake wondering if we would survive another night in the cold. Now I lie awake wondering if this safety is real." The mindset of someone lifted from absolute poverty created fresh, psychological shock. Profound gratitude clashed with the terror of potential loss, leaving her heart in confusing turmoil. Vin listened, his powerful frame still bandaged, but his presence commanding. The inner tearing intensified as he absorbed her words. His empire's vast resources, hidden accounts, loyal networks, properties across the city felt both like a blessing and a curse. He could erase her past debts with a single call, yet the betrayal he now suspected within his own ranks threatened to unravel everything. A trusted captain had been acting strangely, avoiding direct eye contact during briefings and asking too many questions about the children's routines. The emerging doubt gnawed at Vin with fresh violence blending with his remorse, until breathing felt labored. Later that night, after the children had fallen asleep, Vin stepped outside for air despite medical advice. A tense street confrontation unfolded unexpectedly on the perimeter road leading to the safe house. One of Ricci's scouts had been spotted probing the area. Vin's remaining men intercepted the intruder in a quiet pullover, words exchanged in low, sharp tones under the cover of trees. The rival hinted at inside information, suggesting someone close to Vin was leaking details. No physical blows were struck, but the psychological pressure mounted as the scout was released with a clear warning. Vin returned inside, shaken in a new way. Betrayal from within, while I am trying to become the father Lily deserves. The drama escalated the following evening. Emma received a distressing call from a social worker prompted by an anonymous tip, questioning her ability to care for the children amid dangerous associations. She collapsed into a chair after the call, deep disorientation washing over her. Dizziness and pain from old exhaustion made the room spin. "After everything, they still want to take them," she whispered, voice breaking with polite restraint even in her torment. The absurdity of the injustice being judged while protected by immense power tore at her inner world. Gratitude for Vin's protection now mingled with numbing fear that her past poverty would forever define her. Vin comforted her quietly, his now sensitive hand resting on her shoulder in pure paternal responsibility, extended to the whole family. Yet inside, the emerging betrayal consumed him. He reviewed security logs in private, and noticed patterns pointing to his longtime captain, the man who had delivered the false report about his daughter's death years ago. The realization brought extreme psychological shock. The same hand that hid my child from me may now be endangering her again. Violent conflict raged the Don, who demanded loyalty, clashed with the father who wanted only peace. Remorse for trusting the wrong people all these years amplified his torment to new heights. In the quiet hours before dawn, Vin sat alone with Lily, who had woken from a nightmare about the warehouse. She climbed into his lap, pressing her warm palms against his. "You're safe now, Daddy," she said simply, the word coming naturally. The father-child bond pulsed with raw emotion. Vin held her close, feeling every detail of her trust through his healed hands. The love was fierce and protective, burning away some of the darkness, yet the emerging betrayal cast long shadows over this fragile peace. Days later, another unjust situation tested Emma's resilience. A bank error later revealed as possible interference temporarily froze the new accounts Vin had set up for her, leaving her momentarily panicked about providing for the children despite the safety net. She handled it with quiet dignity, her soft voice polite when speaking to the bank representative, but inside, the violent emotional intensity left her breathless. The contrast between Vin's boundless wealth and her ingrained fear of scarcity remained a source of deep inner tearing. Noah, now fully part of the family dynamic, approached Vin one afternoon with a rare openness. "I used to think men like you only brought trouble, but you keep proving me wrong." The boy's words offered a small balm, yet could not erase the captain's suspicious movements that Vin had begun to monitor closely. As recovery progressed and the family prepared to return to a more permanent arrangement, the emerging betrayal hung like a gathering storm. Vin's remorse had grown into a relentless force, pushing him toward decisions that would reshape his empire. The fatherly love for Lily remained his guiding light, passionate, intense, and unbreakable, yet the path forward demanded confronting shadows from within. In a final quiet moment on the safe house porch with Lake Michigan visible in the distance, Vin watched his daughter dancing lightly on the grass with her siblings. The sight filled him with hope, even as betrayal loomed. The rescue had healed much, but the greatest test of trust was only beginning to reveal itself. Later that night in the safe house, where shadows stretched long across polished hardwood floors, Vincent Callahan reviewed encrypted files on a secure tablet. The wound from the warehouse still pulled with every movement, a sharp reminder of how close his world had come to destroying the fragile family he had only just begun to claim. His now sensitive hands gripped the device with steady purpose, yet inside, the remorse had become a living storm, ferocious and unrelenting. The same blood that runs in Lily's veins is the reason enemies circle closer. The fatherly love, once a spark, now raged like wildfire, clashing violently with the calculated ruthlessness his empire demanded. The next morning, Emma prepared breakfast in the safe house kitchen with quiet determination. Her malnourished frame had begun to fill out slightly from consistent meals, but the old scars of poverty lingered in her cautious movements. Only the previous evening, a court notice had arrived via courier, another absurdly unfair demand for back child support from a long-absent figure in her past, dredged up by someone clearly digging into her history. The humiliation of standing in a virtual hearing line while explaining years of street survival left her voice soft and trembling when she later spoke to Vin. "They keep pulling me back to that life. Even here." Dizziness swept over her as she steadied herself against the counter. The contrast between Vin's boundless resources and her ingrained terror of scarcity tearing at her with fresh intensity. Vin comforted her briefly before stepping into a private meeting room. His captain, the man he had trusted for over 15 years, arrived for what was supposed to be a routine briefing. Tension crackled in the air as Vin confronted him with evidence of leaks. Words grew sharp, but controlled a tense standoff, filled with measured accusations. The captain's eyes shifted, revealing cracks in long-held loyalty. Vin prepared to have him detained, his inner conflict reaching new violent heights, remorse for misplaced trust, blending with a father's fierce need to eliminate any threat to Lily. Before the order could be fully given, chaos erupted from an adjacent hallway. Lily had wandered away from the play area, drawn by raised voices. She pressed close to the partially open door and overheard the captain's sudden, desperate confession. "It was me," the man's snarled voice low and bitter. 10 years ago, after your wife was taken out, I faked the report about the baby. The rival paid me well to keep you broken and focused. I never thought the girl would show up again." The revelation struck like lightning. Lily froze in horror, her small body trembling as the words sank in. The captain spotted her. In a bold, shocking move born of cornered panic, he lunged, grabbing Lily and pressing a concealed weapon to her side, not to harm immediately but as leverage. Back off, boss. One call and Ricci knows everything. The armed standoff unfolded in the narrow hallway suspense, thickening the air without a single shot fired. Vin's men held position at a distance, awaiting orders their presence, a silent wall of protection. Emma, alerted by Noah's urgent whispers, rushed forward but stopped short, her face draining of color. Shock and profound confusion left her dizzy and unsteady, one hand clutching the wall as numbness spread through her limbs. "Lily." "No," she whispered, voice soft and polite, even in raw terror. The mindset of a mother lifted from absolute poverty, now facing the ultimate threat to her greatest treasure. Vin stepped into the hallway alone, his powerful frame radiating controlled fury. The fatherly love for Lily surged with overwhelming, burning intensity, protective, soul-deep, and absolute. This man stole my daughter once, and now tries to take her again. Violent inner conflict tore through him with unprecedented force. The Don, ready to destroy the traitor, clashed with the father, desperate to keep his child safe without escalation. His hands fully feeling now, clenched at his sides as he felt every ounce of fear radiating from Lily. Then came the moment no one expected. Instead of crying or freezing, Lily looked up at the captain with wide, determined eyes. She began her silly street dance, exaggerated spins, clumsy cub slides across the polished floor, and playful robot arms, exactly as she had done in the park that first night. Her small voice rang out in a song she had once used to earn coins for food, pure and defiant. The absurdity disarmed the captain for crucial seconds. He stared in stunned confusion, his grip loosening slightly as the armed man tried to process a child dancing fearlessly in the face of danger. Vin moved like lightning. He closed the distance in 2 strides, shoving Lily safely behind him just as the captain reacted. A struggle ensued, tense, wordless, and fierce, but without uncontrolled violence. In the chaos, the captain's weapon discharged, once grazing Vin's shoulder in a searing line of pain. Vin felt every burning detail through his healed hands. The hot sting, the warm trickle of blood, the raw fear for his daughter's life. He disarmed the man with precise strength, his team swarming in to secure the traitor without further harm. In the condensed emotional stillness that followed as the captain was taken away, Lily rushed to Vin. Blood stained his shirt, but she pressed her small hands firmly over the new wound, her voice steady despite the tears. "Daddy, your hands are warm now. Because you finally let me in." The words pierced straight through Vin's soul. He dropped to one knee, pulling her close, feeling every tremble, every heartbeat through his fully awakened senses. The father-child bond cemented in that instant, with shattering depth remorse for the captain's decade-long betrayal, colliding with overwhelming gratitude and protective love that remade him from the inside. Emma reached them moments later, gathering both in her arms. Her attachment had grown into something passionate and fierce, born from the terror of nearly losing her daughter to the very shadows Vin was fighting to escape. Noah and the twins hovered close, their young faces etched with awe and quiet resolve. The disparity struck harder than ever. Vin's empire of fortified wealth and loyal networks surrounding them, versus the years Emma had spent thin and powerless, enduring cold winds and humiliating nights just to keep these children alive. Later that night, as doctors tended Vin's shoulder in the safe house, the full weight of the captain's confession settled. The man who had hidden Lily's existence had been feeding information to Ricci all along, hoping to weaken Vin permanently. The psychological shock left Vin in fresh turmoil, gnawing remorse for trusting the wrong person for so long, now mixed with a clearer, more determined path forward. His hands, bandaged yet fully alive with sensation, rested on Lily's back as she refused to leave his bedside. Emma sat nearby in quiet stillness, her soft voice carrying deep emotion when she finally spoke. "All those years I thought I was protecting her alone. And the danger came from inside your world." Her inner world tore with confusing intensity, gratitude for Vin's protection, now deepened by the shared fight, yet still haunted by the ghosts of her powerless past. In the days that followed, another unjust situation tested them, a sudden audit on the new accounts Vin had established, clearly orchestrated by lingering allies of the captain. Emma handled the calls with polite dignity, though the anxiety left her fighting waves of dizziness and old numbness. Vin watched her with profound respect, his fatherly focus on Lily expanding to shield the entire family with renewed ferocity. Noah approached Vin one afternoon, his voice carrying new trust. "You took the hurt for us, like a real dad would." The words offered a small anchor amid the storm. As recovery continued, the shocking twist had forced everything into sharper focus. Vin's empire, once numb and isolated, now faced a reckoning. The father-child bond with Lily had become his guiding light, fierce, healing, and unbreakable. Through her innocent courage, even in the face of armed betrayal, she had shown him the true meaning of strength. The path to redemption remained shadowed, but the revelation had burned away the final illusions. Vincent Callahan, the powerful Don of Chicago, was no longer merely surviving. He was choosing fatherhood with every beat of his newly awakened heart. Later that night, in the safe house bathed in soft lamplight, Vincent Callahan sat with his family gathered close. The shoulder wound throbbed with every breath, yet the pain paled against the profound awakening in his heart. Lily rested her head against his chest, her small hand intertwined with his fully sensitive fingers. In this condensed moment of emotional stillness, Vin felt the fatherly bond reach its deepest resonance. The man who had once ruled Chicago through fear now understood that true strength came from vulnerability and connection. The next morning, Emma stood by the window, overlooking the wooded grounds, her once thin frame now carrying quiet strength, nourished by safety and care. Another unjust situation had surfaced only days before, an anonymous report attempting to reopen old eviction records in hopes of discrediting her. The absurdity of such cruelty, even after all they had endured, left her momentarily unsteady. A wave of dizziness reminding her of nights spent deprived of food and sleep under biting cold wind. Yet she faced it with soft, polite resolve, when speaking to the authorities, her voice carrying the wisdom gained from survival. Wealth and poverty could never truly separate love and compassion, especially when that love crossed every barrier of skin color or background, binding them as one family. Weeks later, Vin made the decision that reshaped everything. He called a discreet gathering of his most loyal associates and began dismantling the most dangerous parts of his empire. No dramatic confrontations marked the shift, only tense, measured conversations in neutral locations where bold words about new priorities replaced old threats. One final street encounter with Ricci's remaining scouts unfolded under gray skies near the river. Sharp exchanges of territory and respect, diffused through Vin's calm authority without escalation. His men stood firm, but the message was clear. A new path had been chosen. This choice brought fresh inner torment, gnawing remorse for the years spent in shadows, yet also a liberating clarity. In the quiet afternoons that followed, Vin spent hours with Lily on the terrace. She taught him simple joys, planting flowers in garden boxes, sharing stories of their favorite baseball team, and dancing silly routines that now filled the once silent spaces with laughter. Each moment deepened the father-child connection. Vin felt violent inner conflict ease, as he embraced responsibility not just as protector but as a guiding presence. Through Lily's innocent example, he gained valuable knowledge about resilience and the power of small acts of kindness. This knowledge illuminated how compassion could heal even the deepest wounds, offering a profound lesson in humanity that no amount of power had ever provided. The education of the heart, he realized, surpassed any other form of learning. Emma watched these interactions with burning attachment, her own journey from desperate poverty to protected stability, creating its own emotional depth. One evening after another, absurdly unfair delay in clearing her past records, she sat with Vin in a moment of shared stillness. "I once believed the world would always push us back into the cold," she said, voice timid yet filled with wonder. "Now I see that love crosses every divide." Her mindset reflected the powerful transformation of someone once powerless, now embraced by genuine care, evoking deep sympathy for all who walk similar paths. As months passed, the blended family settled into a new life in a quieter Chicago neighborhood. Vin channeled his resources into legitimate community efforts, creating opportunities that reflected the lessons he had learned. Noah thrived in school, often sharing how the experience taught him the true value of trust. The twins brought daily laughter, their drawings now covering the walls of their bright new home. Through every shared meal and gentle conversation, Vin absorbed further knowledge about forgiveness and second chances. This knowledge reinforced a vital lesson in empathy, showing how education of the spirit could turn even the hardest hearts toward light. Another layer of knowledge emerged in quiet talks with Emma, highlighting how compassion knows no boundaries of background or status. One radiant afternoon at Wrigley Field, surrounded by the cheers of fans and the smell of classic ballpark food, Vin knelt before Lily on the grass near their seats. The sun painted the stadium in warm gold as he took her small hands in his. "You saved me in every way that matters," he said, voice thick with emotion. "I thought power defined me, but your courage showed me what truly matters. You are my daughter, and I will spend every day raising you with the love you deserve. We are family, bound by compassion that wealth and poverty can never break, regardless of skin color or past struggles." Lily hugged him tightly, her laughter mixing with happy tears. The father-child bond stood complete, rich with humanistic values that would guide them forward. Emma joined them, pulling Noah and the twins close. In this powerful scene, the family embodied the greatest education of all learning that kindness redeems, that connection heals, and that every soul holds the capacity for change. Through their journey, they gained essential knowledge about the strength found in unity. This knowledge delivered a beautiful lesson in hope and another layer of education in the enduring power of love. A final piece of knowledge settled in Vin's heart. True legacy lies not in empires, but in the lives we lift. In the peaceful days that followed, the family often reflected on these truths. They discovered valuable knowledge about overcoming hardship through shared strength, embracing a heartfelt lesson in forgiveness, and a meaningful education in what makes a house a true home. Each experience brought another gentle lesson in gratitude and further knowledge of life's quiet miracles, completing their education in compassion that transcended every divide. If this story touched your heart, let it remind you of the knowledge we all seek in our daily struggles. May it bring a valuable lesson about choosing kindness and an education in seeing the humanity in every person we meet. Remember the knowledge that love knows no barriers, the lesson of resilience through connection, and the education found in opening our hearts. To everyone watching this video, we wish you good health, a joyful life, and daily peace. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey. Please subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share it with others, so we can bring many more engaging stories every day. How did this story make you feel? How does it connect to your own real life? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The creator truly wants to listen to the emotions from deep within your hearts. Goodbye for now, and we promise to see you again in the next video. Disclaimer: all stories on this channel are fictional and created solely for entertainment purposes. Any resemblance to real people, events, or places is purely coincidental.